Welcome to Verified Fears. Have you ever felt that something was watching you from the rearview mirror? Or heard sounds beneath the asphalt that shouldn't exist? The highway doesn't just connect destinations. It swallows memories, distorts time, and reveals things that were never meant to be seen. Tonight, you'll hear 11 accounts from travelers who encountered the unexplainable on roads, just like the ones you drive every day. Some made it home with questions they'll never answer. Others aren't sure they escaped at all. These moments happened in fog, in daylight, in silence, and in storms. And after tonight, you'll think twice before taking that next exit. But here's the thing. Once you start listening, you won't be able to stop. You ever driven through fog so thick it feels like the world just stopped existing? Like you're not on a highway anymore. You're just floating through some kind of liminal space where the rules don't apply. That's where I was when it started. 3 a.m, somewhere on I-80 cutting through the flatlands of Nebraska. I'd been hauling freight for 12 years at that point. So believe me when I say I'd seen every kind of weather, every kind of night. But this fog, this was different. It didn't roll in gradually like fog usually does. One moment the road was clear under my headlights, the next it was like someone draped a wet curtain over the entire world. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. My high beams just reflected back at me, turning everything into a wall of gray static. I slowed down, white-knuckled the wheel, and kept my eyes locked on the faint yellow line barely visible on my right. That's all you can do in conditions like that. You trust the line, you trust your instincts, and you keep moving. I wasn't alone out there, though. Or at least, I didn't think I was. About 15 minutes into the fog, I started noticing headlights behind me. Not right on my tail, but back there, faint and steady. Then another set appeared. Then another. Within a few minutes, I could count maybe 6 or 7 pairs of lights strung out in a loose line behind me, all moving at the same cautious speed I was. It gave me a weird sense of comfort, you know? Like I wasn't the only idiot out here trying to push through this nightmare. There's something about seeing other drivers in bad conditions that makes you feel a little less alone, a little less vulnerable. I remember thinking, okay, we're all in this together. We'll get through it. But then I noticed something off. None of them were passing me. Now, I wasn't going fast, maybe 45 in a 55. But truckers are impatient. Somebody always wants to push ahead, fog or no fog. But these vehicles, they just stayed back there, locked into formation like they were glued to the road. I couldn't make out what kind of vehicles they were either. The fog blurred everything into vague shapes and those amber-white orbs of light. I tried adjusting my mirrors, squinting through the murk, but all I got was silhouettes, boxy shapes. Could have been vans, maybe SUVs. Hard to say. They didn't feel like trucks, though. The headlights were too low, too uniform, and they didn't drift or sway the way vehicles do when a driver's fighting to stay awake. They moved with this eerie precision, like they were on rails. I tried the CB radio, keyed in and asked if anyone back there could hear me, if anyone wanted to coordinate a rest stop or just, talk to break the tension. Static. I switched channels, tried again. Nothing. Just that low, crackling hiss you get when nobody's transmitting. I even tried the emergency channel. Silence. That's when the comfort started curdling into something else. You ever feel like you're being watched, but you can't see who's doing it? That's what this felt like. I kept glancing at my mirrors, watching those lights hover behind me, and the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. They weren't just following me. They were mimicking me. Every time I tapped my brakes, they slowed. Every time I drifted slightly left or right, they adjusted in perfect unison. It was like looking at a reflection that moved a half-second too late. I decided to test it. I slowed down more, dropping to maybe 30 miles an hour, figuring someone would get annoyed and pass me. But they slowed too. All of them, perfectly synchronized. My stomach tightened. I sped up to 50. They sped up. I changed lanes, drifting into the left lane even though I couldn't see much of anything. They followed, every single one of them, shifting over in a smooth, silent wave. No honking, no flashing lights, no irritation. Just this calm, methodical mirroring. My hands started sweating. I could feel my pulse in my throat, that hot, prickling sensation you get when your brain is screaming that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong, but you can't articulate why. Then one of them got closer. I don't know how I didn't notice it approaching. It just suddenly appeared in my mirror, maybe 10 feet off my bumper now. Close enough that I could finally make out more details. It was a van, dark-colored, maybe black or deep blue. No plates that I could see. The headlights were perfectly circular, almost too bright, like they were LEDs cranked to maximum. But here's the thing that made my blood go cold. There was no one in the driver's seat. I'm not talking about tinted windows or a shadow I couldn't make out. I mean, the cab was empty. I could see straight through the windshield into the dim interior, and there was nothing there. No silhouette, no movement. Just an empty seat and a steering wheel that somehow, impossibly, was holding the vehicle steady on the highway. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my breath coming fast and shallow now. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was the fog distorting what I saw. Maybe the angle was wrong. Maybe the driver was slouched down or wearing all black. But I knew what I saw. I knew. And when I forced myself to look back again, the van was still there, still empty, still following me with that unnerving precision. I wanted to floor it, to tear away from whatever this was. But I was too afraid of losing control in the fog, of skidding off the road into a ditch where no one would find me until morning. So I just kept driving, locked into this crawling procession of silent, impossible vehicles. Then, one by one, they started disappearing. The van behind me was the first. I glanced at my mirror, and it was just gone. Not like it had fallen back or turned off. It vanished mid-frame. There 1 second and absent the next, leaving only empty fog where its headlights had been. My breath hitched. I checked my side mirror, then the rear view again, scanning for it. But there was nothing. Just the other lights, still trailing behind me in that perfect line. And then another one blinked out. Then another. It was like someone was flipping switches, erasing them from existence, one at a time. No brake lights, no sounds, no veering off onto an exit I couldn't see. They were just ceasing to be. I don't know how to explain the feeling that gripped me in that moment. It was beyond fear. It was a kind of existential vertigo, like the ground had dropped out from under reality itself. I wasn't just scared. I was unmoored. I started talking to myself, whispering under my breath, trying to anchor myself to something solid. I read the numbers on my dashboard out loud, checked my speedometer, touched the steering wheel to make sure it was real. My CB radio crackled with static, and for a split second I thought I heard a voice, low and garbled. But when I keyed in and asked if someone was there, the static swallowed it whole. I was shaking now, my whole body vibrating with adrenaline and dread. When I finally looked back again, they were all gone. Every single one. The fog stretched out behind me, empty and vast, swallowing the highway into nothing. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And somehow that was worse than being followed, because now I didn't know if any of it had been real. I didn't know if I'd imagined the whole thing. If exhaustion had twisted my perception into something nightmarish. But I could still feel it. The weight of those lights. The wrongness of those empty vehicles, the way they'd moved like they were tethered to me by invisible strings. I could still feel it pressing on my chest, suffocating me. I drove for another hour in that fog, not daring to stop, too terrified of what might be waiting for me if I pulled over. When the fog finally lifted, just as suddenly as it had appeared, I was somewhere in western Iowa. The sun was starting to bleed pale light across the horizon, and the highway looked normal again. Empty, but normal. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing, just trying to convince myself that I was okay, that whatever had happened back there was over. But here's the thing I can't shake. The thing that keeps me awake some nights when I'm out here on the road. I checked my dash cam when I got home. I have one running 24/7, records everything in front of and behind my rig. I scrolled through the footage from that night, hoping to prove to myself that I'd seen something real, that I wasn't losing my mind. The fog was there. My truck was there. But the convoy, the lights, the empty van, none of it showed up. Just me, crawling through the fog, alone the entire time. And I still don't know which possibility terrifies me more. That they were never there, or that they were, and for some reason, they didn't show up on camera. Let me tell you about the worst decision I ever made. And it started with something as simple as ignoring a gut feeling. You know that voice in your head that tells you to keep driving, to not stop, to trust your instincts even when logic says you're being paranoid? I ignored that voice. And what happened next? What happened in that motel room in the middle of the Mojave Desert? It changed something fundamental in me. I don't sleep well anymore. I don't trust locked doors. And I sure as hell don't stop at roadside motels, no matter how tired I am, no matter how bad the weather gets. It was late August, maybe 9 or 10 at night, and we'd been driving for 14 hours straight. My partner and I were doing this cross-country move, hauling everything we owned in a packed U-Haul, trying to make it from Phoenix to San Francisco in 2 days. Ambitious, stupid, whatever you want to call it. We thought we could power through, take turns driving, maybe catch a few hours of sleep in the truck if we needed to. But then, the storm hit. And I'm not talking about rain. This was a full-blown desert thunderstorm, the kind that turns the sky purple-black and sends lightning crackling across the horizon like the world's splitting open. The rain came down so hard, it turned the highway into a river. Visibility was maybe 10 feet. We couldn't see the lane markers, couldn't see other vehicles, couldn't see anything except the sheets of water hammering our windshield. So when we saw the motel sign glowing through the downpour, vacancy in flickering neon red, we didn't hesitate. We pulled off the highway onto this gravel lot, tires crunching through puddles, and sat there for a second just staring at the place. It looked exactly like every forgotten roadside motel you've ever passed and never thought twice about. Single story, maybe 15 rooms in a long row, paint peeling off the walls in sad little curls, doors painted this faded turquoise that might have looked cheerful 50 years ago. The office was at the far end, a small building with one yellow light burning in the window. The parking lot was empty except for one other car, a sedan covered in dust, parked at the opposite end. The whole place felt abandoned, like we'd stumbled into something that time forgot. But we were exhausted, soaked from the rain, and desperate. So we went inside. The guy at the front desk was older, maybe 70s, with this thin white hair and watery eyes that didn't quite focus on us when we walked in. He didn't say much, just slid a key across the counter, an actual metal key, not a card, and told us we were in room 7. Cash only. No receipt. We paid, took the key, and dragged ourselves back out into the rain. Room 7 was right in the middle of the row, wedged between two other rooms that looked dark and empty. The door stuck when I tried to open it, swollen from humidity or age or both. And when it finally gave way, the smell hit us immediately. Mildew and dust and something sour underneath, like old food left to rot. But we were too tired to care. We dropped our bags, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. That's when the tapping started. Soft at first, so soft I almost thought I was imagining it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 gentle knocks against the window, slow and deliberate, like someone testing to see if we'd notice. I sat up, staring at the curtains. They were thick, heavy fabric the color of dried blood, pulled shut across the window. My partner was already asleep next to me, breathing deep and even, totally oblivious. I told myself it was rain, just rain hitting the glass at a weird angle. But the rhythm was too precise, too intentional. Tap, 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 then silence. Then it started again, a little harder this time. Tap, tap, tap. I got up, my legs shaky, and moved toward the window. My hand hovered over the curtain, and I stood there for what felt like forever, debating whether to pull it back. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to look, to get back in bed and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But curiosity, stupid, reckless curiosity, won. I grabbed the edge of the curtain and yanked it aside. Nothing. Just darkness and rain streaking down the glass. No one standing outside, no shadow, no movement. Just the empty parking lot illuminated by the occasional flash of lightning. I let the curtain fall back and stood there, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I was being irrational. But the tapping didn't stop. It moved. It shifted to the door. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and measured, like someone was standing right on the other side, waiting for me to answer. I checked the peephole. Nothing. Just the rain and the dim glow of the motel sign reflected in the puddles. I backed away from the door, grabbed my phone to check the time, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. It was 11:47 p.m. But that didn't make sense. We'd checked in around 9:30, collapsed onto the bed maybe 15 minutes later. I couldn't have been asleep for more than an hour. But my phone said 11:47. I checked again, refreshed the screen, convinced it was glitching. The time didn't change. 2 hours had just vanished. I hadn't been asleep. I'd been lying there awake, listening to the tapping. But somehow time had slipped away from me without my noticing. I shook my partner awake, my voice tight and urgent, and tried to explain what was happening. The tapping, the missing time, the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with this place. But they just looked at me with those groggy, half-awake eyes and told me I was stressed, that I needed sleep, that it was just a storm and an old building settling. They rolled over and went back to sleep. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab our bags and run out into the rain and never looked back. But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I didn't trust my own perception anymore. So I got back into bed, pulled the covers up to my chin, and lay there in the dark, listening. The tapping continued on and off for hours, sometimes at the window, sometimes at the door. Once, I swear I heard it coming from inside the walls, like fingernails scratching against wood and plaster. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just lay there, rigid and terrified, watching the red glow of the alarm clock on the nightstand as the minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. And then, somewhere around 3 a.m, I heard voices. Low murmuring, like a conversation happening just outside our door. I couldn't make out words, but I could hear the cadence, the rhythm of people talking. I got up again, pressed my ear against the door, and listened. The voices stopped. Silence. Then footsteps, slow and shuffling, moving away from our room toward the far end of the motel. I looked through the peephole again and caught a glimpse of a shadow disappearing around the corner. Someone had been out there. Someone had been standing right outside our door. When morning finally came, it felt like a mercy. The storm had passed, leaving everything drenched and gray under a pale sky. We packed up fast, didn't bother with showers or breakfast, just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. But when we walked outside, we both stopped dead. Our car, covered in dust, thick, heavy dust, like it had been sitting there for weeks instead of one night. And there were handprints all over the windows, dozens of them. Small handprints, like a child's, pressed against the glass from the outside, smudged and overlapping. My partner stared at them, face going pale, and asked if I'd touched the car during the night. I hadn't. Neither had they. We stood there in the parking lot, staring at those handprints, and neither of us said a word. We just got in, locked the doors, and drove. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the trip. Not during the drive, not when we unpacked, not for weeks afterward. But then one night, maybe a month later, my partner finally brought it up. They asked if I remembered leaving the motel room at any point during the night. I said no. I'd been awake the whole time. I would have noticed. And then they told me something that made my blood turn to ice. They said they woke up once, sometime in the early morning hours, and I wasn't in bed. They looked around the room and saw me standing at the door with my hand on the knob, like I was about to open it. They called my name, and I turned around and got back into bed without saying a word. They thought I'd been sleepwalking. But here's the thing. I don't remember that. I have no memory of getting up, of going to the door, of standing there. And if I don't remember it, what else happened that night that I've forgotten? I've tried to find that motel since. Looked it up online, searched maps, even driven that same stretch of highway. It's not there. No motel, no sign, no evidence it ever existed. And sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I hear it again. Tap, 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 soft and deliberate, like someone's still looking for me. I want you to picture something for me. You're alone in your car, driving through a mountain pass at midnight, nothing but rock walls on one side and a sheer drop on the other. No guardrails, no streetlights. Just your headlights cutting through the dark and the occasional reflective marker telling you there's still a road underneath your tires. You haven't seen another car in over an hour. Your phone has no signal. The radio is just static. And then you see something that shouldn't be there. Something that makes every rational thought in your head shut down and scream at you to turn around. That's where I was when this happened. That's the moment everything I thought I understood about the world cracked wide open. I was a sophomore in college, driving back to campus after Thanksgiving break. I decided to take the scenic route through the Cascades because I was young and stupid and thought it would be an adventure. The main highway would have added 2 hours to my trip, but this mountain pass, Route 20, winding through the North Cascades, cut straight through. Everyone told me not to take it at night. My mom, my roommate, even the gas station attendant where I filled up before heading into the mountains. They all said the same thing. Wait until morning. It's not worth it. People get lost up there. But I was confident. I had GPS, a full tank of gas, and the invincibility complex that comes with being 20 years old. So I ignored them. Big mistake. The first hour was fine. Beautiful even. The road twisted and climbed through dense forest, and my headlights would occasionally catch the eyes of deer or raccoons watching from the trees. The temperature dropped steadily as I gained elevation, and patches of fog started appearing, clinging to the road in wispy layers. By the time I reached the actual pass, the highest point where the trees thinned out and gave way to bare rock, it was just past midnight. That's when I noticed the lights. At first, I thought they were other cars. Headlights, maybe, from vehicles somewhere off the main road, either on a service road or a hiking trail. But these lights weren't moving like car lights. They were drifting, floating almost, about 50 yards off the road to my right, hovering in the darkness above the rocky terrain. There were 3 of them, spread out in a loose triangle, glowing this pale yellow-white color that reminded me of old street lamps. They moved slowly, bobbing up and down like they were suspended on invisible strings. I slowed down, squinting through my passenger window, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Drones, maybe? Helicopters? But there was no sound. No engine noise, no rotors, nothing. Just silence and those lights, drifting through the dark. I told myself to keep driving. Whatever they weren't my problem. But curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over onto a narrow shoulder, put the car in park, and just watched them for a minute. They moved in this strange, synchronized pattern, rising and falling together, never getting closer or farther from each other. And then one of them changed direction. It stopped bobbing and started moving toward the road, toward me. I felt my chest tighten. The light grew brighter as it approached, and I could see now that it wasn't a solid glow. It pulsed, flickering like a dying bulb, and there was something in the center of it. A darker shape, vaguely human-sized, silhouetted against the light. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The light stopped maybe 20 feet from my car, just beyond the edge of the road, hovering at eye level. And that's when I heard it. A voice, faint and distorted, like it was coming through a bad radio connection, but unmistakably a voice. It said 3 words, slow and deliberate. Don't go further. I'm not kidding. That's what it said. Don't go further. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the light, my mind racing to rationalize what I was hearing. A speaker? Some kind of prank? But there was nothing around me. No people, no equipment. Just rock and fog and that light, pulsing and hovering, and that voice echoing in my ears. Then the light drifted back, rejoining the other 2, and all 3 of them began moving away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the edge of the road. I should have listened. I should have turned around right then and driven back the way I came. But I didn't. I convinced myself I'd imagined it, that exhaustion and isolation were playing tricks on me, that there had to be a logical explanation. So I put the car in drive and kept going. That's when everything went wrong. About 10 minutes later, my phone lost GPS signal. Not just weak signal, complete loss. The blue dot that had been tracking my position on the map just vanished. The screen showed nothing but a gray void with the word "searching" blinking at the top. I tried refreshing, restarting the app, restarting my phone. Nothing worked. Okay, fine, I thought. I don't need GPS. I'm on a road. Roads go somewhere. Just follow the road. Except the road started doing things roads shouldn't do. It narrowed, first gradually, then sharply, until it felt like my car was barely fitting between the rock walls on either side. The pavement got rougher, cracked and uneven, and I started seeing potholes I had to swerve around. None of that had been there on the way up. I distinctly remembered the road being smooth, well-maintained, 2 full lanes. But now it was barely wide enough for one vehicle, and the fog was getting thicker, creeping across the asphalt in heavy waves. My headlights just reflected back at me, turning everything into a claustrophobic tunnel of white. Then I realized I hadn't seen a mile marker or a reflective sign in at least 20 minutes. No indication of where I was, how far I'd gone, or how far I had to go. Panic started creeping in, cold and sharp. I slowed down to a crawl, leaning forward over the steering wheel, straining to see the road ahead. And that's when I heard the tapping on the roof of my car. Light, rhythmic tapping, like someone was gently drumming their fingers against the metal. I froze. My eyes shot up to the roof liner, as if I'd be able to see through it, as if I'd see a hand pressed against the outside. The tapping continued, moving from the center of the roof to the back, then to the passenger side, then back to the front. It was circling my car. I hit the gas. I didn't care about the fog or the potholes or the narrow road anymore. I just needed to move, to get away from whatever was up there. The tapping stopped. But then I heard something worse. Voices. Multiple voices, whispering just outside my windows, too low to make out words, but loud enough to know they were there. I could hear them moving alongside the car, keeping pace no matter how fast I drove. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I fumbled for the window controls, made sure they were all the way up, checked the locks 3 times. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, layering over each other in this incomprehensible chorus. And then my car died. Just cut out completely. The engine sputtered once and went silent. The headlights flickered and went dark. The dashboard lights blinked off. I was plunged into absolute blackness, sitting in a dead car in the middle of a mountain pass with no idea where I was or what was outside. The whispers stopped. The silence that followed was so total, so suffocating, that I could hear my own pulse throbbing in my ears. I sat there, hands still gripping the wheel, too terrified to move, too terrified to breathe. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on gravel, circling the car. I couldn't see anything. The darkness was complete. But I could hear them. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They stopped at my driver's side door. I heard breathing, slow, raspy breathing, right outside my window, inches from my face. And then a voice, the same distorted voice I'd heard before. But closer now, clearer. "We told you." I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. Tears were streaming down my face. I was shaking so hard, the whole car felt like it was vibrating. The breathing stopped. The footsteps moved away, fading into silence. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been an hour. Time didn't mean anything anymore. But eventually, my car started. Just turned over on its own, engine rumbling to life, headlights blazing back on. The dashboard lit up like nothing had happened. I didn't question it. I slammed my foot on the gas and drove. I drove until the road widened again, until I started seeing signs and mile markers, until the fog lifted and I could see the sky again. When I finally made it out of the pass and hit the main highway, the sun was starting to rise. I pulled into the first rest stop I found and sat there in the parking lot, crying and shaking. When I checked my car later, there were scratches on the roof. Long, deep scratches, like something with claws had been up there, dragging them across the metal. And when I looked at the photos on my phone from that night, trying to prove to myself that I'd seen those lights, every single photo was corrupted, just static and distortion. Except for one. One photo came through clear. It showed the road ahead of me, taken from inside my car. And standing in the middle of the road, barely visible in the headlights, was a figure. Dark, tall, watching. There's something you need to understand about being a parent. When you have kids in the car, your entire world narrows down to one singular focus: keeping them safe. Every decision you make, every turn you take, every mile you drive is filtered through that lens. You check your mirrors more often. You drive more carefully. You pay attention to things you might otherwise ignore. So when I tell you what happened on that rural back road in Vermont, I need you to understand that I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't tired. I wasn't distracted. I was hyper-aware, locked into every detail, because my family was with me. And that's what makes what I saw so much worse. We'd been visiting my wife's parents for the weekend, one of those obligatory family visits where everyone pretends everything's fine, even though nobody really wants to be there. By Sunday afternoon, we were all ready to leave. We packed up the minivan, me, my wife, our 2 kids in the back, and headed out around 4 in the afternoon. We should have taken the interstate. It was longer, but it was familiar, well-lit, populated. But my wife suggested taking the scenic route, this winding back road that cut through farmland and forest. Said it would save us 40 minutes. The kids were getting restless, and I was exhausted from small talk and forced smiles. So I agreed. Another mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life. The road was exactly what you'd expect. Narrow, cracked asphalt with faded yellow lines, surrounded by dense trees on both sides. Barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other. No houses, no gas stations. No signs of civilization, except for the occasional rusted mailbox leaning into the ditch. The sun was starting to sink, casting everything in that strange golden light that makes shadows stretch out long and thin. My daughter was playing on her tablet in the back seat. My son was asleep next to her, head lolled against his car seat. My wife was quiet, staring out the passenger window. Everything felt normal. Peaceful, even. Then I noticed something in the rearview mirror. A shape, dark and indistinct, maybe 20 yards behind us, moving along the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was a person walking, maybe someone whose car had broken down. But the longer I watched, the more wrong it looked. The shape didn't move like a person. It moved too smoothly, almost gliding. And it was keeping pace with us, even though I was doing 45 miles an hour. I blinked, adjusted the mirror, convinced I was seeing things. but it was still there. And then I realized there was another one on the opposite side of the road. Same dark shape, same smooth gliding movement, matching our speed exactly. I didn't say anything to my wife. Not yet. I didn't want to alarm her if it turned out to be nothing. Maybe it was shadows, I told myself. Maybe it was the angle of the sun playing tricks through the trees. But when I checked the side mirrors, I could see them there too. Clearer now. They looked like figures. Tall, human-shaped, but somehow not quite right. Too thin, too elongated. And they were definitely keeping pace with us, moving parallel to the car on both sides of the road. My hands tightened on the wheel. I pressed the gas a little harder, pushing up to 50. They matched my speed. 55, still matching. 60. The van started rattling on the uneven road, and my wife looked over at me, concerned, asking why I was driving so fast. I just told her I wanted to get home before dark. But the figures didn't fall back. If anything, they seemed to be getting closer, narrowing the gap between us and them. I could see more detail now, and what I saw made my stomach turn. They weren't walking. They didn't have legs. Or if they did, I couldn't see them moving. They just moved, flowing across the ground like oil spreading across water. And their heads. God, their heads were wrong. Too large, tilted at unnatural angles, like broken necks that somehow still functioned. I checked the rear view again, and my heart nearly stopped. There were more of them now. 4, 5, 6. Strung out behind us in a loose line, all moving in perfect synchronization. All keeping pace no matter how fast I drove. My son woke up. He rubbed his eyes, looked out the window, and then went very still. I saw it in the rear view. His face small and pale, staring out the back window. And then he said something that made every hair on my body stand on end. Dad, why are those people following us? My wife spun around in her seat, looked out the back window, and I heard her breath catch. She saw them too. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt, and said my name in this tight, terrified whisper. I told her to stay calm. Told the kids everything was fine, but my voice cracked and betrayed me. None of us believed it. I floored it. The van lurched forward, engine roaring, speedometer climbing past 70 on a road that wasn't meant for anything over 45. We bounced over potholes, swerved around curves, and the whole vehicle shook like it was going to rattle apart. But the figures stayed with us. They moved faster, effortlessly, like speed meant nothing to them. They started closing in from the sides, drifting closer to the road, and I could see more details I wish I hadn't. Their arms were too long, hanging down past where their knees should be. Their fingers, if you could call them that, were thin and seemed to multiply, branching off into smaller tendrils. And their faces. I only caught glimpses, but that was enough. Blank. No eyes, no mouths. Just smooth, featureless surfaces that somehow still conveyed malevolence. Then the van started making a noise, a grinding, mechanical whine that made my heart sink. The engine was overheating. I could see the temperature gauge climbing into the red, the warning light flashing on the dashboard. My wife was crying now, clutching the door handle, whispering prayers or curses or both. My daughter had stopped looking at her tablet and was staring out the window, silent and wide-eyed. My son was crying, asking what was happening, why those people looked like that, why they wouldn't go away. I didn't have answers. I just kept driving, begging the van to hold together, begging whatever God might be listening to get us out of this. The engine died with a shudder and a hiss of steam. We coasted maybe 50 yards before momentum gave out. And then we were just sitting there, dead in the middle of that empty back road, surrounded by trees and fading light and those things closing in from all sides. I tried to restart the engine. Nothing. Just a clicking sound and the smell of burning oil. My wife grabbed my hand, squeezing so hard I thought bones might break, and we both stared into the mirrors, watching the figures approach. They were 10 yards away now. Then 5. They moved in this horrible, synchronized way, converging on the van from every direction. My daughter screamed. One of them was right next to her window, its featureless face pressed against the glass, those 2 long fingers splayed across the surface. I yelled for everyone to get down, to stay away from the windows, and we all huddled in the center of the van, holding each other, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. The figures surrounded us. I could hear them moving outside, hear something scraping against the metal, hear this low humming sound that vibrated through the entire vehicle. My son buried his face in my chest. My daughter was hyperventilating. My wife was whispering over and over, "Please, please, please." And then, just as suddenly as everything had started, it stopped. The humming ceased. The scraping sounds faded. I lifted my head, looked around, and the figures were gone. Just vanished, like they'd never been there. The trees were still. The road was empty. The only sound was our ragged breathing and my daughter's quiet sobbing. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute, waiting for them to come back, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. I tried the ignition again, not expecting anything. But the engine turned over immediately. Started up like there had never been a problem. The temperature gauge was normal. No warning lights, no mechanical issues. I drove. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove that van straight through to the interstate, and we didn't speak. Not one word. The kids fell asleep eventually, exhausted from fear. My wife stared straight ahead, tears running silently down her face. When we finally pulled into our driveway 3 hours later, I checked the outside of the van. There were marks. Long, thin scratches running along both sides, across the hood, over the roof. Hundreds of them. Crisscrossing and overlapping like something with too many fingers, had been touching every surface, exploring, testing. And in the back window, pressed into the dust and grime, were handprints. Dozens of them. Small and large and everything in between, all clustered together like they'd been fighting to get closer. We never told anyone what happened. Who would believe us? But my kids don't sleep through the night anymore. My wife checks every mirror compulsively when she's driving. And me, I can't drive down rural roads anymore. Even during the day, even with other cars around, I can't do it. Because sometimes, just for a second, I see shapes in the mirrors. And I know they're still out there, still following, still waiting. I drive for a rideshare company, have been for 3 years now. You'd think after thousands of rides, after navigating every back street and shortcut in the greater Portland area, I'd have seen everything. Drunk passengers, weird conversations, people having breakdowns in my back seat. I've dealt with it all. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened that Tuesday night when I ignored my GPS and ended up somewhere that shouldn't exist. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times, trying to find the rational explanation, the logical breakdown of events. But there isn't one. Some places aren't meant to be found, and some roads don't want to let you leave. It was just after 11 p.m. I'd been driving since 6, running back-to-back rides, trying to hit my weekly goal before calling it a night. The app pinged with one last request. Pick up at a bar downtown, drop off at an address about 20 minutes south. Easy money. I accepted it, pulled up to the bar, and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I sent the standard courtesy text, waited another 3 minutes, then canceled the ride and collected the no-show fee. Happens all the time. People order a ride, change their minds, pass out before I arrive, whatever. I wasn't bothered. But here's where things get weird. As I was pulling away, my GPS glitched. The screen flickered, went black for a second, then came back showing a route I hadn't requested. A blue line snaking through streets I didn't recognize, heading in a completely different direction than I'd been planning to go. I should have refreshed the app. Should have pulled over and reset my phone. But I'd been driving on autopilot for hours, exhausted and not really thinking, and my brain just kind of accepted what the screen was showing me. So I followed it, turned right instead of left. Took a street I'd never noticed before, even though I'd driven past that intersection hundreds of times. It was narrow, tree-lined, the kind of residential road where all the houses look identical, and you can't tell one block from another. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating mailboxes and parked cars and nothing unusual. The GPS kept directing me forward, that calm, automated voice telling me to continue for half a mile, then turn left. I turned left onto an even narrower street, then right, then left again. And somewhere in that series of turns, I crossed a threshold I didn't recognize at the time. The houses stopped, the streetlights disappeared. The pavement got rougher, cracked and uneven, and the trees pressed in closer on both sides until it felt like I was driving through a tunnel. I glanced at my phone. The GPS was still showing that blue route, still directing me forward. But the street names had changed to things I'd never heard of. Roads that didn't sound like Portland roads. Names that were just strings of numbers and letters, like coordinates instead of actual names. That's when I started to feel it. That creeping sense of wrongness that settles into your bones before your brain catches up. I slowed down, looking for a place to turn around. But the road had become too narrow. Trees on both sides, their branches forming a canopy overhead so thick I couldn't see the sky. No driveways, no cross streets. Just this winding path that kept pulling me deeper into the forest. I tried to stop the GPS, to cancel the route and enter my home address manually, but the app froze. The screen locked on that blue line, and no matter what I tapped or swiped, it wouldn't respond. Then the trees started moving. I know how insane that sounds, but I'm telling you what I saw. The trunks would be in one position when my headlights swept past them. And then, when I glanced in my rearview mirror, they'd shifted, closer to the road, blocking the path behind me. I told myself it was shadows, tricks of the light, exhaustion playing with my perception. But deep down, I knew. The forest was closing in, and the road itself was changing. I'd drive past a distinctive tree with a split trunk, and then 2 minutes later, I'd see the same tree again from a different angle. The road was looping, folding back on itself in impossible ways, and I was trapped in it. My phone rang. The sudden sound in the silent car made me jump so hard I swerved. I grabbed it, hoping it was the rideshare app, hoping it was anything normal. But the caller ID just showed a string of zeros. I answered anyway, desperate for any connection to the world I'd left behind. Static. Thick, crackling static, and underneath it, something else. A voice maybe, or voices, speaking in rhythms I couldn't follow. Words that didn't sound like words. I hung up, threw the phone onto the passenger seat, and focused on driving. But it kept ringing, over and over. That same string of zeros, that same static and those same impossible voices. I stopped the car, just put it in park right there in the middle of the road, and sat with my hands on the wheel, trying to breathe, trying to think. The headlights illuminated maybe 20 feet of road ahead before the forest swallowed everything. Behind me, when I checked the mirror, was just darkness. Total, impenetrable darkness. Like the road simply ceased to exist the moment I passed over it. My engine was still running, but I could hear something else now. A rustling in the trees. Movement. Things shifting through the underbrush on both sides of the road, keeping pace with where I'd stopped. I couldn't see what was making the sounds, but I could feel eyes on me. Multiple sets of eyes, watching from the shadows. Then they appeared at the edge of my headlights. Figures, 3 of them, standing in the road ahead. They looked human from a distance, but the closer I looked, the more wrong they became. They were too still, posed like mannequins, arms hanging at slightly wrong angles. Their clothes didn't move in the breeze I could see rustling the trees. And their faces. I couldn't make out their faces. Not because it was too dark, but because they didn't seem to have faces. Just smooth, blank surfaces where features should be. They stood there, blocking the road, and I realized they were waiting for something. Waiting for me to make a choice. I put the car in reverse. I didn't care that I couldn't see behind me, didn't care that the road might not even be there anymore. I just needed to move, to get away from those things. But when I hit the gas, the car didn't move. The engine revved, the tires spun, but it was like I was stuck in place. I shifted to drive, tried going forward. Same thing. The car wouldn't move. I was pinned there, suspended in that impossible moment, while the figures started walking toward me. Slow, deliberate steps, their feet making no sound on the pavement. I did the only thing I could think of. I leaned on the horn, held it down, filling the forest with that sharp, angry sound, shattering the oppressive silence. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. The figures stopped. They tilted their heads in unison, like they were listening or confused or both. My car lurched forward suddenly, breaking whatever had been holding it, and I floored it. I drove straight at them, half expecting to hit them, half expecting them to stop me. But at the last second, they stepped aside, melting back into the trees. And I shot past the spot where they'd been standing. The road opened up. Just like that, without warning, the trees fell away, and I was on a proper street again. Streetlights, houses, parked cars. The GPS screen flickered and died, then restarted, showing my actual location in a neighborhood I recognized. I pulled over, my whole body shaking, and checked the time. It was 11:17. I'd been on that detour for what felt like an hour, but only 7 minutes had passed. 7 minutes. I checked my trip history in the app. There was no record of the route I'd taken. No streets, no detour, no evidence I'd gone anywhere except straight from the bar to where I was currently parked. I drove home. I didn't take any more rides that night or for a week after. I couldn't. Every time I got behind the wheel, I'd feel it again, that sense of being pulled somewhere I didn't want to go, of roads that reached out and grabbed you and wouldn't let go. I started driving during daylight only. I stopped trusting GPS. I mapped out every route manually before accepting rides. My ratings dropped because I took longer routes, refused certain pickups in areas that felt too isolated. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. A few weeks ago, another driver in my area, Someone I'd chatted with at the airport staging lot a few times disappeared. Just vanished mid-ride. The passenger said the driver took a wrong turn into a residential area, and the passenger got uncomfortable and asked to be let out. The driver apologized, stopped the car, let them out. The passenger walked to a main street and ordered another ride, but the driver never reappeared. They found the car 3 days later, abandoned on a dead-end street that locals swear wasn't there before. The GPS in the car was still on, showing a route through streets that don't exist. I know where that driver went. I know what road they found. And I know they didn't make it back. I was lucky I got out. But some nights, when I'm lying in bed trying to sleep, I hear it. That static. Those voices underneath, speaking in rhythms that don't make sense. And I wonder if I really escaped at all, or if I'm just waiting for the road to call me back. You ever notice how some sounds feel wrong for the place you're in? Like your brain has a catalog of what a highway should sound like: engines, tires, wind. And the second something doesn't fit, your skin tightens before you even know why. That's what happened to me. I was alone on a long, empty stretch of road, and underneath the steady thrum of my tires, I started hearing something else. Not outside, not in the engine, under the road itself. If you stay with me, really picture what I'm telling you, you'll understand why I can't drive at night anymore without turning the radio off and listening, just to make sure it isn't happening again. It was late, around 2 in the morning, on a highway that was half finished. One of those long construction zones where they narrow everything down to a single lane and choke the road with cones and barriers. I'd taken a last-minute job across state lines, and the company needed me back by morning. So I drank my coffee, shrugged off the heaviness in my eyes, and told myself I could push through. The sky was this low, featureless gray, like the clouds were sitting on the roof of the car. A slow drizzle tapped at the windshield, not enough for a storm, just enough to smear the light from my headlights into a hazy glow. I remember feeling almost comforted by the monotony of it. One lane, no exits, no decisions. Just point the car forward and go. They had the speed limit reduced to 45 through the work zone, so I set the cruise control and let the engine settle into a soft, constant hum. Concrete barriers ran along both sides, close enough that I felt like I was threading the car through a narrow tunnel. On my left, the opposite lanes were closed, ripped up and unfinished, dotted with heavy machinery sleeping in the dark. On my right was just a wall of concrete, high enough to block any view of what lay beyond. It felt sealed, contained, like the world outside had been shut out. I turned down the radio to relieve the headache creeping in behind my eyes and let the quiet settle over the car. That's when I heard it. A sound under everything else, hiding beneath the rumble of the tires and the distant whisper of wind. At first, it was just a sensation, more than a sound. A faint vibration coming up through the floorboards, like someone far below was knocking gently on the underside of the car. I thought maybe it was just the new pavement. They'd been digging, laying fresh asphalt. Sometimes that can create weird sensations. But the farther I drove, the more distinct it became. It wasn't random. It had a pattern, a kind of dragging rhythm that rose and fell, like something was moving slowly beneath me, scraping along the underside of the road. I turned the radio off completely, the silence snapping into place so hard it rang in my ears. For a few seconds, all I heard was the steady thump of the tires over the seams in the concrete. Then, there it was again. A low, dull thud from below, followed by a scraping sigh that vibrated up through the steering column and into my hands. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Like a heavy body being pulled along rough ground. The hairs on my arms lifted. I told myself it was equipment under the overpass or some kind of underground work, pipes maybe, or machinery. But the work zone was empty. No lights, no movement. Just my car and that sound. I eased off the cruise control and let my speed drop. As I slowed, the sound changed. It didn't stay behind me like something stationary would. It adjusted, matched. The dragging slowed, the thuds came farther apart, perfectly synchronized with the speed of my car. I pressed the gas again, and the rhythm quickened, like whatever was underneath me was keeping pace. It hit me then that the noise wasn't coming from one spot. It was traveling with me, under me, as if I were rolling along on top of it. My mouth went dry. I pressed my heel harder into the floor to ground myself. To feel something solid that wasn't trying to rearrange my understanding of reality. The pedal was firm under my foot. The steering wheel felt normal. The gauges all read fine. There was nothing visibly wrong with the car. But that sound kept threading itself through the quiet, tapping at my nerves. I rolled the driver's window down a crack, letting the cold, wet air lick at my face, and listened. Outside, the world was soft. Light rain, a distant hiss of highway far beyond the barriers, the occasional clatter of a loose cone shifting in the wind. Under that, faint but unmistakable, was a muffled moan. It came up through the chassis like a voice speaking through the car's bones. Not words, just a long, low exhale threaded with pain. It started at the front, near the pedals, and moved beneath my seat before fading near the back wheels. I jerked upright, my shoulders tightening so hard they ached. I almost slammed on the brakes, but the thought of stopping, of letting whatever was under there catch up and settle directly beneath me, made my chest clench. Instead, I kept rolling, caught in that horrible calculation between speed and control. Too fast, and I crash. Too slow, and I have to hear more. The construction signs ticked past in the edges of my headlights. Road work ahead. Single lane, uneven surface, fresh pavement. None of them mentioned, by the way, there might be something alive under there. Half a mile later, another sign appeared. Prepare to stop. I saw the red flare of brake lights up ahead, a line of cars backed up behind a flagger's truck, and my stomach dropped. I couldn't keep moving. In a minute, I'd have to come to a complete stop with that sound still under me. The closer I got to the stopped line of vehicles, the louder it became. The dragging turned into a frantic scraping, the dull thuds into heavy, desperate impacts. I could feel them now, knocking through the soles of my shoes, shivering up my spine. That moan thickened, pushed through the metal and fabric between me and whatever was down there, until it became something almost like sobbing. Not loud, never loud, but constant, threaded with this awful, hopeless exhaustion. It felt like the road itself was trying to breathe. I eased the car to a stop at the end of the line and put it in park, my hands still welded to the wheel. The world went unnaturally still. No engines roaring, just low idles. Raindrops ticking against glass. The flagger's truck up ahead with its hazard lights blinking an indifferent orange. I glanced at the car in my rear view. An SUV, driver's face lit by their phone, completely oblivious. No one else seemed to hear it. No one else was reacting. Either that or they were better at pretending than I was. Underneath, the sound concentrated. All at once, it felt like everything beneath my seat sank by an inch. Just enough for my body to register the drop. It was like the world below had exhaled and collapsed. And then I heard it. Clear as if someone were lying on the asphalt an inch under my feet, whispering through clenched teeth. A single word, or maybe more, mangled by pressure and distance. Here. That's what it sounded like. A breath-pushed syllable rising up from somewhere no voice should be able to come from. My vision tunneled. The edges of the windshield darkened, and all I could see was the wet road in front of me and my own hands shaking on the wheel. I wanted to throw the door open, to get out and drop to my knees beside the car, press my ear to the asphalt and see if I was losing my mind or if there truly was something trapped below. But something primal in me refused. The same instinct that keeps you from leaning over the edge of a tall building was screaming that if I broke the thin layer of distance between us, if I acknowledged it by getting closer, I might not come back the same. The line of cars started to move. The flagger's truck rolled forward, hazard lights still blinking, and the small line inched along. Relief hit me like a wave, and, just as quickly, curdled into new dread as I realized the sound was moving with me again. Whatever was down there, it wasn't tied to one point on the road. It was staying under my car. I crept forward with the line, shoulders hunched, listening. The scraping had changed. It was less frantic now, more purposeful. Strokes in one direction, then a pause, then again. Like something was trying to pull itself along. Every so often, the weight under the car would shift, a subtle rocking that made the suspension murmur. My mind started filling in details I didn't want. Hands raw and bloody, searching for cracks. A body pressed flat, forced into a space too small, bones grinding against rough concrete. I knew it was ridiculous. There was no physical way for someone to be under there, not with rebar and foundation and all the layers between soil and surface. But knowing that didn't help. Logic doesn't do much when your senses revolt. We finally reached the end of the construction zone. The barriers fell away. The lanes opened back into a normal double stretch of highway, and the speed limit signs returned to their usual numbers. The flagger waved us through with a casual lift of his hand and a tired nod. And just like that, the sound stopped. No fade out, no gradual easing. 1 second, it was there. Scraping, thudding, that thin, desperate voice. The next, nothing but tire noise and the sigh of the rain. It was like driving off the edge of a nightmare. I should have been relieved. But what hit me instead was a hollow kind of horror. Because as soon as it stopped, I understood something I hadn't let myself fully think while I was in it. That wasn't the first time. That road had been under construction for months. They'd been digging, closing lanes, diverting traffic. How many nights had drivers crossed that stretch without knowing anything was wrong? How many people had heard a bump or a vibration and written it off as bad pavement? And deeper than that, a question I still can't shake. Was whatever I heard trapped there because of the construction? Or did they build that road over it on purpose? I pulled into a rest area about 10 minutes later, hands still trembling, and sat in the car with the engine off and the lights out. The rain whispered on the roof. Trucks rumbled in and out. People came and went under the glow of sodium lamps. Everything looked aggressively normal. I opened the door, stepped out onto the wet concrete, and just listened. My shoes squeaked. Distant engines hummed. Somewhere, a vending machine whirred. No scraping, no voices, no impossible weight lurking under the surface. I thought about getting down and putting my ear to the ground anyway, just to prove to myself that it was over. I even bent my knees, halfway to crouching, before my body locked up. I couldn't do it. I couldn't willingly put my head closer to whatever might be under there and invite it into my ear, my skull, my thoughts. Some lines, once crossed, you don't get to come back from. You can tell yourself this was exhaustion, that I hallucinated the whole thing after too many hours on the road. I'd love to believe that. It would make my life a lot easier. But here's what's kept me from fully accepting that tidy explanation. I went back a month later. During the day. Out of morbid curiosity or stubbornness, I don't know which. The construction was done. Fresh blacktop, clean lines, smooth as glass. But halfway through that same stretch, every radio station I tried turned to static. My phone dropped its signal for exactly 2 miles. And there, in the stillness under the music and the road noise, just for a moment, I felt it again. The faintest tremor in the floorboard. One slow, distant thud from below. Like something reminding me it was still down there. If you ever find yourself driving through a long construction zone at night, and you feel a sound instead of hearing it. If the road suddenly feels like more than just concrete and rebar, do yourself a favor. Turn the music off, listen closely, and whatever you do, don't stop. You know that feeling when you're already on edge before anything actually happens? When your body knows something is wrong long before your mind will admit it? That was me that night. If we were sitting together right now, and you asked why I don't do long daytime highway drives anymore, not even in perfect weather, this is the story I'd have to tell you. Because what happened to us didn't depend on darkness. It happened in the middle of a bright, endless stretch of sun. No fog, no storm, nowhere to hide, nowhere to pretend, it was just shadows. There were 2 of us on that trip, just friends splitting the drive on a cross-country move. The plan was simple. Alternate every few hours. Keep it light. Take the scenic route through the flat center of the country, because it seemed cheaper and faster than dealing with traffic near big cities. It was the 3rd day on the road when it really started. We were somewhere in the middle of a long, straight highway that felt like it stretched from one edge of the planet to the other. No exits in sight, no billboards, no towns. Just the asphalt, the sky, and that dry, buzzing heat that makes the air above the road shimmer like it's about to peel open. I was behind the wheel. The sun was high and brutal. So bright, it washed the color out of everything. The sky looked too big, like it was leaning down on the car. My friend was half asleep in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, feet braced against the dashboard. We'd been on that same stretch of road for what felt like hours. Yellow lines ticking by, the same low scrub and fenced-off fields on both sides. No curves, no elevation changes. No landmarks. Just straight, straight, straight. It should have been boring. It should have been the least memorable part of the entire trip. I only realized something was wrong when I checked the clock on the dash. It read 1:37 p.m. That made sense the first time I saw it. But when I glanced again what felt like 15 or 20 minutes later, it still said 1:37. Same exact numbers. Same position of the sun. Same stretch of road. I frowned, tapped the dash like that would somehow fix it, then glanced at my phone in the cup holder. 1:37 p.m. No notification of lost signal. No glitch icon. Just time. Frozen on that exact minute. Like everything else had kept moving forward, but the clock refused to acknowledge it. I didn't say anything at first. I told myself I'd misread it. That highway driving does weird things to your sense of time. That maybe it had only been a minute or 2. My friend snored softly. The air conditioner hummed. The tires whispered across the pavement in that constant hypnotic drone that settles into your skull. But a creeping unease started to curl in the pit of my stomach. I forced myself to look up and focus harder on the road, scanning ahead for anything new. A sign, an overpass, a change in the pattern of fencing along the side. We passed a green mile marker on the right, 214. I remember it clearly because I read it out loud in my head just to have something to hold on to. 214. Okay, progress. The car rolled on. The horizon shimmered. Sweat prickled along my spine beneath my shirt, even though the interior was cool. A few minutes, what I thought were a few minutes. Later, we passed another green mile marker. 215. Same lean of the post. Same dent at the lower edge. Same torn sticker on the corner. My throat went dry. I checked the clock again. 1:37. This time I said something. I reached over and nudged my friend's arm, my voice a little too steady as I told them to wake up and look at the time. They groaned, took off their sunglasses, blinked blearily at the dash, then at their phone. Both said 1:37. They chuckled, said sometimes the time display in cars lags, and maybe my phone hadn't updated. Maybe we just crossed a time zone. Maybe I was overtired. They were reaching for answers as badly as I was. Then they shifted in their seat, looked out the window, and went quiet. Didn't we already pass that? They asked, nodding toward the right side of the road. I followed their gaze. Same leaning fence post, same scraping of rusted metal gate, same crushed patch of dry grass just beyond the shoulder. It was like someone had taken a section of the highway and copy-pasted it, looping it underneath our wheels without bothering to hide the seams. I swallowed hard. We watched together in silence as the scenery stayed stubbornly the same for the next several minutes. Same shape of the small tree in the distance. Same crooked telephone pole. Same fading skid mark on the shoulder. It wasn't like seeing similar farmland or the same type of ditch. It was exact repetition. Down to little details your brain only starts to catch once it's desperate for proof you're not crazy. I turned off the cruise control, needing to feel the connection between my foot and the speed. I sped up to push against the feeling, then slowed way down, watching the speedometer rise and fall. The road did not respond. It stayed identical. The mile marker that should have changed did not. 214 again, winking at us like a joke. My friend checked the GPS on their phone. According to the map, we were moving. The little blue dot crawled forward along the highway. Distance to the next town ticked down. On the screen, we were progressing through space like normal travelers. But outside the windshield, reality was stuck on repeat. We decided to test it. There was no one behind us. No one had appeared in the mirror for a long time. So I eased the car over onto the shoulder and came to a complete stop. Dust swirled lazily around us, catching in the sunlight. The engine idled. Inside the car, the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere had thickened. We sat there, both of us staring at the clock. 1:37. My friend opened their phone and started a timer. Seconds counted up. 10, 20, 30. Time moved on the screen, marching forward exactly the way it should. The clock on the dash did not. 1:37. The world outside did not. The air stayed exactly as bright. No cloud shifted, no shadow lengthened. The heat pressed in, unchanging. "Let's turn around," my friend said, voice low. "Just turn around. Go back." I put the car in gear, heart hammering, and pulled a careful U-turn across both lanes of the empty highway. Now we were facing the direction we'd come from, or should have. I pressed the gas and started driving. The scenery flowed past. The same tree, the same fence, the same dented metal gate, the same 214-mile marker. We had changed direction, but the loop had not. It was like we were a toy car dragged back and forth over the same track. The timer on the phone kept ticking. The clock stayed locked. There's a special kind of fear that comes in when you realize help might not exist where you are. It's not like being lost in a city or stranded with a flat tire. Even then, there are rules. Physics, time, distance. Call for help, walk to a gas station, wait long enough, and the position of the sun will prove the day is still moving forward. Out there, on that strip of highway that had stopped obeying, none of those anchors held. We tried calling someone, anyone, just to hear a human voice. The calls would not go through. Not a busy signal, not a dropped call. Just the ringing that never ended, like the network was stretching toward something that wasn't there. We argued, I'll admit that. Panic does that to people. My friend wanted to stop the car, get out, and see if walking changed anything. I wanted to keep moving, because every instinct I had screamed that leaving the vehicle meant stepping fully into whatever this was. Finally, we compromised. We'd slow to a crawl, roll down the windows, and look for anything at all, that wasn't part of the repeating pattern. So we did. Windows down, hot air flooding in, my foot barely touching the gas. The engine's hum seemed wrong in the heavy quiet. The road noise sounded thinner, almost hollow. I started talking just to fill the silence, pointing out cracks in the asphalt, bits of trash on the shoulder, anything that marked change. For a moment, it almost worked. I spotted a new piece of torn white plastic snagged in the fence that hadn't been there a minute before. My friend saw a different tire mark on the opposite lane. Hope flared. Maybe we were moving out of it. Maybe it had been a weird little pocket and we were finally crossing the edge. Then we saw the car. Same make, same model, same color. Parked on the shoulder ahead, angled slightly toward the ditch. Windows up, lights off. It was our car. There was no other way to say it. Same scratch on the rear bumper. Same cracked plastic near the front plate. Same faded air freshener dangling from the rear view. The only difference was that we were inside our car, moving, and that one was utterly still. I slowed to a stop without meaning to. My brain just refused to process motion. We sat there, staring at ourselves, if that's what it was. The world around us remained frozen at 1:37 p.m. The other car, our car, did not vanish, did not glitch, did not blur. It just existed, quiet and wrong, like a photograph dropped into a place it didn't belong. My friend whispered that we should not get out. I agreed so completely, my hands wouldn't even go near the door handle. Instead, I did the only thing left that felt possible. I put my foot down as far as it would go. The car lurched forward, engine screaming as we shot past the still version of ourselves. For an instant, as we drew parallel, I swear I saw movement inside it. A shadow in the driver's seat, a shape leaning forward over the wheel. I didn't let myself focus. I just kept my eyes locked on the strip of road ahead, waiting for some sign it was changing, that the loop was breaking. We crossed some invisible threshold. I know that because of how sudden it was. One heartbeat, we were barreling along that endless, repeated mile. The next, the light shifted. Just a fraction, just enough to make my eyes water. A sign appeared on the right that we hadn't seen before. Next, exit 2 miles. The clock on the dash flickered, then jumped to 2:09 p.m. My friend's phone buzzed with a backlog of delayed notifications. Far behind us, in the mirror, there was only empty road. No duplicate car, no repeating fence. Just an ordinary highway dissolving into distance. We didn't speak for a long time after that. When we did, it was only to confirm the details. Make sure we both remembered it the same way. The clocks, the mile marker, the other car. We tried to rationalize it, to fold it into some story where we'd been half asleep or misreading signs or suffering some shared episode of highway hypnosis. But then we looked at the trip meter. According to the odometer, we had driven an extra 50 miles that didn't match any features on the map. 50 miles of nowhere. If you ever find yourself on a road that feels like it stopped making sense, don't try to be clever. Don't test it. Don't loop it. Don't get out to see what's really happening. Turn around the moment your gut twists and get back to somewhere that has clocks and people and bad coffee and ugly gas station bathrooms. Places that obey time. Because out there, where the horizon doesn't move, where the sun hangs in place and the mile markers lie, something else is driving, and you're just along for the ride. If you were sitting next to me right now and asked why I will never, ever pick up a hitchhiker again, no matter how harmless they look, no matter how bad the weather is, I'd start with this night. Not because it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but because it felt so normal at the beginning that it still makes me question my own judgment. I want you to picture yourself where I was. Alone in your car on a coastal highway, early morning mist rolling in from the ocean. Tired but not exhausted yet. You see someone on the shoulder, thumb out, just a dark shape in the gray light. You tell yourself you're being decent. You tell yourself you're helping. You have no idea you're about to invite something into your car that doesn't belong anywhere near another human being. I was driving along a stretch of coastal road in the Pacific Northwest, one of those highways that snakes along cliffs with glimpses of water through the guardrails. It was just after sunrise, though you wouldn't know it from the sky. The mist was thick and low, turning everything into soft shades of blue and gray. The air had that heavy, salty wetness that seeps into your clothes. I'd left a small town about an hour back, coffee in the cup holder, a podcast murmuring low from the speakers. No traffic. No noise except the tires on damp asphalt and the distant muffled crash of waves down below. That's when I saw them. A figure on the right shoulder, standing very still, one arm out with the thumb extended in that old, desperate gesture you don't see much anymore. At first I thought it was just a road sign or a mile marker blurred by the mist. But as I got closer, the shape resolved into a person. Hood up, backpack slung over one shoulder, clothes dark and soaked from the damp air. No wild waving, no running toward the car, just that steady, hopeful stance. I drove past a few seconds, arguing with myself. Keep going. It's not your problem. They'll be fine. But the guilt crept in anyway. That road was empty. There might not be another car for a long time. I sighed, cursed under my breath, and pulled over. They jogged up to the passenger side and opened the door without saying anything at first, like they'd been expecting me specifically. When they slid into the seat, the first thing that hit me was the cold. Not regular, been standing outside cold. This was deep, bone-level chill. Like they'd just come out of a walk-in freezer. The air on their side of the car instantly felt different, denser somehow. They thanked me in this quiet, hoarse voice. Said they just needed a lift to the next gas station or junction, anything up the road. I glanced at their face. It was unremarkable. That's the part that bothers me now. I can't clearly remember their features. Not their eye color, not the exact shape of their nose or mouth. Just a general impression of a face that your brain would forget as soon as you looked away. We drove in silence at first, the car filling with the smell of wet fabric and something else underneath. Faint metal, like coins left too long in your hand. The mist seemed to thicken the farther we went, swallowing the edges of the road, softening the world into this dim, moving tunnel of gray. I turned the wipers up a notch and shut off the podcast, suddenly self-conscious about the cheerful voices chattering in the background. They thanked me again, said people didn't usually stop anymore, that most just stared and kept going. Their voice sounded like it hadn't been used in a long time. I asked the usual small-talk questions. "Where are you headed? Been out here long? You from around here?" They answered, but the answers slid right off my mind. Even in the moment, it was like my brain couldn't hold on to the details. I remember something about got separated from someone and trying to get back before it gets worse. I remember them saying they'd been walking most of the night. But everything else blurs, like a dream you can't quite pull into focus after waking up. What I do remember clearly is when the radio started acting up. 1 second it was off. I hadn't touched it since they got in. The next, it crackled to life all on its own, volume low, tuned to a station I never listened to. Not music, not talk radio. Just a thin veil of static with faint voices buried deep underneath. As if a dozen conversations were happening all at once in some other room just beyond the wall. I reached out to turn it off. Embarrassed, muttering something about old wiring and automatic systems. Before my fingers touched the dial, my passenger said, very softly, "Just leave it." The way they said it stopped me. Not a request, not quite a command either. More like something between the two. I let my hand fall back to the wheel. The static continued, a soft, irregular hiss that ebbed and swelled with the movement of the car. Every so often, a few words would rise up out of it, too warped to be intelligible, but sharp enough to make my shoulders tense. It sounded almost like warnings, like traffic updates in a language I didn't know. The mist outside grew thicker. Visibility shrank to maybe a car length ahead. The lines on the road faded at the edges. The usual landmarks, turnouts, mile markers, those green reflective posts along the shoulder, seemed to be gone. It was just road and fog and a sense of vast emptiness lurking on both sides. I felt my grip on the wheel tightening, my heartbeat thudding a little harder than I wanted to admit. I told my passenger this was one hell of a morning for a walk. They didn't laugh. They were staring straight ahead, posture too rigid, eyes fixed on some point far down the road that I couldn't see. "Don't slow down," they said after a minute. "Not in this." "I can't see much," I answered. "If I keep this speed and a curve comes up." "There aren't any curves for a while?" they said immediately, with a certainty that made the hairs on my arms prickle. "Just don't stop. Whatever you hear, whatever you think you see, don't pull over." That was when the first shape appeared in the fog ahead. At first, it was just a darker patch in the gray, a smudge that stubbornly refused to resolve into anything familiar. As we drew closer, it sharpened into the outline of a person standing in the middle of our lane, facing us. No reflective vest, no car, no hazard lights. Just a lone figure framed by the dissolving white. Instinct screamed at me to brake, and my foot twitched toward the pedal. Beside me, my passenger's hand snapped out, fingers digging into my arm with surprising strength. "Don't," they whispered. "Just keep going. It's not there." Every rational part of me recoiled at that. I was not about to run someone down because a stranger in my passenger seat told me it wasn't there. But something else, a deeper animal part of my brain that had been quietly sharpening its teeth in the background believed them, believed that if I stopped, whatever was out there would become very real, very fast. My jaw clenched. I eased my foot back to the gas, heart hammering, and aimed the car straight through the figure. We passed right through it. There was a sensation, not impact, not resistance. More like driving through a sudden pocket of air 20 degrees colder than the rest of the world. My breath steamed in front of me for one brief second, even though the heater was on. Every inch of my skin puckered. The shape dissolved behind us without turning its head, without reacting at all. My passenger finally let go of my arm. My sleeve was damp where their fingers had dug in. "How did you know?" I asked, voice low and unsteady. "They like to step closer if you slow down," they said. "Or knock." I didn't want to think about what they meant by that. But a few minutes later, I found out anyway. The fog seemed to pulse with our movement now, drawing in tight around the car and then billowing away in slow breaths. The radio static rose subtly in pitch, and beneath it, the hidden voices started to align, like they were tuning in from chaos towards something clearer. My eyes burned from staring so hard through the windshield. I blinked and felt the grit in my lashes. Then came the tapping. Gentle at first, on the rear passenger window directly behind my seat. A light, polite knuckle rap, as if someone was just letting us know they were there. Tap, 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 tap. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. Just fog and the pale glow of my own taillights bouncing back off it. The tapping moved to the other side. Tap, tap. A pause, then louder at the back glass. Tap, tap, tap. "Don't look," my passenger said quickly. Their voice had changed now, tighter, suffused with a strain that made my chest tighten in sympathy. "They hate when you see them. It makes them... hang on." "Who?" I asked before I could stop myself. They turned toward me then, and for the first time, I got a clear look at their face. Or rather, the lack of one. Not that there were no features, there were, but they didn't seem to settle. Every time my eyes tried to lock onto a specific detail, it shifted. The jaw a little narrower, then broader. The cheekbones higher, then softer. Eyes that seemed to darken and lighten in tiny, unsettling flickers. It was like my brain was trying to overlay a dozen different people onto the same skull and couldn't decide which one it was supposed to recognize. I had to look away, dizziness curling behind my eyes. "They get stuck," they said quietly. "In heavy mist, on roads like this. People who never quite finish their trip. They see headlights and think it's theirs, or help, or something better than what they've got now. They don't mean to be dangerous, not at first. They just don't want to be alone." Something dragged across the roof of the car, a slow, scraping sound, as if fingers, or something longer, were feeling for a way inside. The radio hiss jumped. For a heartbeat, all the hidden voices surged into clarity, overlapping whispers spilling through the speakers, a rush of "wait" and "stop" and "don't leave me," before collapsing back into static. My knuckles were white on the wheel. My throat tasted like metal. "Why can you see them?" I asked. "Why do you know all this?" They looked back out at the road, shoulders hunching, the edges of their form blurring in my peripheral vision, like the mist was licking at them too. "Because I didn't keep going," they said. "Long time ago. Different car, same kind of morning. I pulled over when they asked me to. I opened the door." The meaning of that dropped into my chest like a stone. A cold understanding seeped in behind it. The chill when they got in, the way the time outside the car seemed detached. The wrong sliding way my memory refused to fix their face. I realized then that I hadn't actually seen their feet when they climbed in. Just a shape entering the door, then weight in the seat. "Am I going to wreck?" I asked, the question tumbling out raw and small. "Is that what this is?" "If you listen, probably not," they said. "They're heavier when you give them what they want. Attention, fear, names. Just drive until the fog breaks. Then I'll get out." There was something final in that last sentence that lodged behind my ribs. I didn't fully understand it, but my gut did. The tapping on the glass intensified, moving faster now, circling the car. I refused to look. I stared down the center of the lane like it was the only thing keeping the world from unraveling. My eyes stung, my neck ached. Every few seconds, that scraping touch returned to the roof, feeling along the seams, testing the thin barrier of metal and glass. We drove like that for what felt like an hour, though the clock only ticked forward by 10 minutes. The mist began to thin almost imperceptibly, the gray light brightening by slow degrees. The voices in the static faded one by one, until only a faint, distant hiss remained. The tapping dropped away, leaving my ears ringing with phantom echoes. For the first time since they'd gotten into the car, I could see more than 2 car lengths ahead. Rock face on one side, guardrail on the other, and beyond that, a broken glimpse of dark, churning water far below. A blue sign emerged out of the clearing air up ahead. "Scenic overlook 1 mile." I felt something in the car ease, like tension lifting out of the very frame. My passenger exhaled. The temperature on their side of the cabin seemed to tick up a degree, losing that deep freezer edge. "You can let me off there," they said. "You'll be fine after that." I nodded, unable to find words. The next mile passed in strained, fragile silence. When I pulled into the overlook turnout, the fog was peeling away from the cliffs in ribbons, revealing the slate-colored sea thrashing against rocks below. Early morning light broke through the clouds in thin beams. Other cars were parked there. Normal people stretching their legs, taking photos, sipping coffee out of travel mugs. The world had snapped back into a version of itself I understood. I turned to say something, to thank them, to ask what exactly had just ridden shotgun with me. But the seat was empty. The damp mark they'd left, the faint fog on the glass where their breath should have been, was already fading. The passenger door was still locked. The floor mat on that side was bone dry. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, watching the mist retreat out over the water. When I finally pulled back onto the highway, the radio was dead silent. No static, no hidden voices, no broken stations. Just the low hum of the engine and the world returning to its ordinary palette of sound. Since that morning, I don't stop for people on the side of the road. Not in fog, not in clear weather, not ever. Maybe I passed someone who really needed help. Maybe I condemned them to more walking, more cold, more waiting. But I can't risk inviting anything else into the car that doesn't cast a clear shadow, that doesn't fully belong to this side of the glass. If you're ever driving through that kind of mist and you see someone with their thumb out, standing just a little too still, in a place where no one should be, it's your call. Just remember that not everyone who wants a ride is trying to get somewhere new. Some of them are just trying to get out of where they're stuck, and they don't really care where they leave you in exchange. If you and I were in a car right now, driving some quiet two-lane road with the windows cracked and the night pressing in, and you asked me the exact moment I stopped trusting my own memories, I'd start with a sound. Not a scream, not a crash. A soft, broken crying that didn't belong to anyone in my car. And a roadside memorial that somehow knew more about me than it should have. This was a few summers ago, late July, the kind of evening where the sky hangs on to that last strip of orange forever, before finally giving up and going dark. I was cutting across back roads to avoid a long construction mess on the main highway. You know the kind of route. Google shows it as a thin gray line through nothing. But it cuts 20 minutes off your time, so you take it and tell yourself it'll be fine. The air was still, heavy with the smell of cut hay and dust. Windows down, radio low, just me, the car, and that endless ribbon of cracked asphalt. I almost didn't notice the memorial the first time I passed it. Just a flash of white on the side of the road, a wooden cross half lost in tall weeds, a cluster of weather-faded plastic flowers leaning in the breeze. There was a little stuffed animal tied to it, limp and gray from sun and rain. The kind of thing you see, feel a quick ache in your chest for some strangers you'll never know, and keep going. But just as I was about to pass it fully, the radio cut out. 1 second. Music. The next, a hiss of static, thin and sharp. And underneath it, just for a beat, a sound like a baby monitor picking up crying from another room. The noise was gone almost as soon as it appeared. The song came back, the road rolled on, and I told myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I hit a dead spot. Maybe someone nearby had some weird interference going, whatever. I shook it off and drove another 10, 15 minutes. The sky finally melted into real dusk. Fireflies started blinking in the fields. I remember thinking how oddly peaceful it was, how quiet. No other cars, no houses, no lights, except the narrow cone of my own headlights stretching ahead. That's when I saw the memorial again. Same side of the road, same crooked white cross, same wilted bundle of fake flowers, same sagging stuffed animal hanging from a bit of twine. I knew it was the same one because of the way one of the flower stems was broken, bent at an ugly angle, and the toy's one plastic eye was missing. You don't forget details like that, not when you've just told yourself you're leaving it behind. My hands tightened on the wheel. I checked the GPS, expecting to see a hairpin curve I'd missed or a loop in the route. The map showed a straight line, no turns, no circles. According to the little blue arrow, I was moving forward. As I passed the memorial the second time, the radio cut out again. Same pattern, full static like someone had ripped the signal away. But now the sound underneath was clearer. A thin, glitchy crying, layered with something else. The soft, intermittent crackle you hear on cheap baby monitors when someone shifts on the other end. Then a whisper. Too distorted to make out words, but the tone hit me in the gut. Not anger, not menace, grief. It felt like the sound of someone who'd been crying so long their voice had frayed. I killed the radio completely after that. Just reached over and turned the knob until the silence clicked. For a minute, that made me feel better. Controlled. The only sounds left were the engine's low rumble, the tires humming on imperfect pavement, and the faint thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. I rolled the windows up too, suddenly aware of how exposed the open night made me feel. Then, stupidly, I slowed down the next time I saw the cross. Don't ask me why. Curiosity, maybe. Guilt. That sense we get when we feel like we're being noticed. The third time I saw it, the sky had shifted from dusky blue to that deep, almost black, where shapes lose their edges. My headlights hit the white paint of the cross and threw it into sharp relief. This close, I noticed more. A set of old glass jars at the base, each one clouded with age, like someone had once put candles in them. A small pink baby shoe half buried in the dirt. A photograph in a cheap frame that had long since gone too fogged to see. I pulled onto the gravel shoulder a few yards past it. The car rocked gently as it settled. For a second, everything stayed normal. The engine ticking as it cooled, the faint chirp of insects building in the fields. My own breath ragged from trying not to acknowledge that I was scared. Then I heard it again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the dead radio. The crying was inside the car. It was faint, like it was leaking through the speakers even though everything was off. A soft, hitching sob that rose and fell right behind my seat. Not a wail, not a scream. Just that exhausted, hopeless sound of someone who's been crying so long that the tears have stopped, but the body hasn't figured it out yet. My scalp prickled. I turned slowly, every muscle tight, and stared at the back seat. Empty. But the sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew a little clearer, like my attention was the dial it needed to tune itself in. Now it wasn't alone. Underneath the crying was a faint wash of static and a tiny electronic whine I recognized instantly. The hum you hear when a baby monitor is on, but nobody's talking yet. I knew it because my sister had a kid, and I'd spent enough nights crashing on their couch with that thin metallic noise buzzing through the wall. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That if I just got out, stretched my legs, looked at the memorial up close, I'd find some mundane explanation. A hidden house, an unseen driveway with some old equipment running, a logic I could wrap this in. So I did the thing every horror story tells you not to do. I got out of the car. The air outside was cooler than it had any right to be for July. The kind of cool that feels damp against your skin, like walking into a basement. The night pressed close, full of noises that all stopped as soon as I shut my door. No crickets, no rustling. Just stillness. My headlights spilled sideways enough to catch the memorial fully, throwing long, weird shadows across the ditch. Up close, it was worse. The baby shoe wasn't alone. There were two of them, one upright, one on its side, both too small for anyone who'd ever walked. The jars at the base were coated on the inside with thin, oily soot like candles had burned there down to nothing, over and over, until the glass remembered every flame. Someone had carved a date into the wood of the cross. But the weather had softened the numbers. I could only make out fragments. A month, a year. The day had been eaten by rain and sun. As I stared at that half-erased date, the crying swelled again, right up against my ear, like someone was holding a monitor inches from my head. I spun around, heart in my throat. The road was empty in both directions, vanishing into darkness. My car sat quiet, its dashboard lights dim. The only glow around me came from my own headlights and the faint red of my taillights reflecting on the asphalt. Then the monitor noise clicked. If you've ever used one, you know the sound. That tiny shift when someone presses the button to speak. The static thins, the channel opens, and for a split second, everything goes very clear. That happened, right there in the open air, by the side of that forgotten road. The invisible line went live, and a voice, small, shaking, ragged, said a single word in my ear. Why? It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. It was worse than that. It was bewildered, lost. Like whoever was speaking couldn't understand how the world had moved on without them. That one syllable hit me harder than a scream could have. My throat locked. My eyes burned. Without meaning to, I whispered back, "I'm sorry." For what? I couldn't have told you. For them. For whoever had died here. For whoever had left the little shoes and the jars and the faded toy. For not stopping the first time. For stopping now. For everything. The air pressed tighter around me. For a heartbeat. I had the distinct, horrible feeling that if I looked down, I would see fingerprints gathering in the dust on my shoes. Small ones. Smudging upward. I bolted for the car. When I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, I realized something was very wrong before I even got the engine started. The seat was adjusted differently, farther forward than I left it. The mirror was tilted slightly down, like someone shorter had been driving. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, but the radio did too. Full volume, though I'd turned it off. Not music, not static. Voicemail. My own voice, echoing back at me in broken fragments, played over the speakers. Snatches of messages I recognized and others I didn't. Me leaving my sister a reminder. Me calling in sick to work one time. Me laughing, telling someone I'd be there in 10. They overlapped, skipping, rewinding in little jerks, voices layering into a confused echo chamber. Underneath, in every gap, the crying seeped back through. I slammed my palm against the radio, killing the sound mid-sentence. For a second, the car was so silent, I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Then, softly from the back seat, I heard the crackle hum of that invisible monitor again. The cushion dipped, just slightly, just enough for my peripheral vision to register movement in the rear view. I didn't look. I threw the car into drive and peeled away from the shoulder, gravel spitting under the tires. The memorial slid out of my headlights and vanished into the dark behind me. As I picked up speed, the pressure in the car eased by inches. The crying faded, but it didn't stop. It followed like a memory, like when you've heard a song too many times and the echo lingers after the music cuts. I didn't see the cross again after that. No matter how far I drove, no matter how many more miles of that road I covered, it never reappeared. Eventually, I hit a junction, bright and ugly with a gas station and a fast food place and harsh fluorescent lights. The normalcy of it hit me so hard, I almost laughed. Inside the gas station, under buzzing ceiling lights and background country music, I grabbed a drink just to have something to hold. At the counter, I asked the cashier, trying to sound casual, if there had been an accident on the back road. I described where I thought it was, the rough distance, the vague turn-off. Their expression went blank in that way people get when they're thinking about something they wish they could unknow. They nodded once, said, yeah, there'd been a bad one a few years back, a family, a baby. Locals had put up a memorial, came out for a while to light candles, then stopped. People still go out? I asked. Not really, they said. Folks say it's hard on them. They start remembering things that aren't theirs. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. I already knew. Since that night, there are memories in my head that do not belong to me. Flash images that come with no context. Tail lights flaring too close, a baby's car seat in my peripheral vision, a woman's hand slamming against a dashboard. The taste of pennies and burned rubber. They hit at random times. In line at the grocery store, half awake in bed, sitting at a red light. They feel as real as anything I've actually lived. Maybe it's just my brain filling in the blanks, trying to make sense of a story I only brushed the edge of. Or maybe that roadside memorial didn't just hold flowers and shoes and soot. Maybe it was full of overflow, grief looking for somewhere to go. And I pulled over with my windows open and let it climb in. If you ever see one of those forgotten shrines on a dark, empty road and feel that tug to stop, to stand there and pay your respects, think carefully. Grief is heavy. Memories are sticky. And some places, once they start sharing theirs with you, don't give them back. You ever have something follow you without moving an inch? Not a car, not a person, but a voice that knows you so well it shouldn't exist? If we were parked somewhere dark right now, engine ticking, your hands still on the wheel, this is the story I'd tell you. The one that ruined the sound of a CB radio for me forever. Because after that night, every time I hear another driver's voice cut through the static, a part of me wonders if it's really coming from where it says it is, or from just behind me. I've been running a rig for a long time. Long enough that the highway feels more like home than any apartment I've ever rented. There's a comfort in the routine of it. Miles, markers, familiar truck stops, the low company of voices drifting through the CB at 2 a.m. when the world feels thin. That night, I was hauling through a stretch of Appalachia, all rolling black hills and narrow curves, the kind of road where the trees lean in close and your headlights feel swallowed instead of helpful. It was full dark, moon hiding behind thick cloud, only the yellow lines and the occasional reflector keeping me anchored to the asphalt. I'd been awake too long, I'll admit that. On my second thermos of coffee, playlist looping, windows cracked just enough to let cold air slap me in the face whenever my eyelids got too heavy. Somewhere past midnight, the chatter on the radio thinned out. Drivers peeled off to sleep or turned their sets down. For a while, it was just the soft hiss of open channel, my tires humming, the occasional rattle when the trailer hit a rough patch. Then a voice cut through, clear, familiar, like it had only been waiting for a quiet moment to slip in. "Hey, you still awake out there?" I flinched a little, more from the suddenness than the words. Grabbed the mic, thumbed the button out of habit. "Yeah, still here," I said. "Who we got?" They laughed. Not a stranger's laugh, a specific one. I knew that sound down to its timing, the way it always caught slightly at the start. It was a friend I used to run with years back on regional hauls. Long nights, stupid jokes, shared coffee at grimy counters. Someone who hadn't been on the airwaves, or anywhere else, for a long time. "Don't tell me you forgot already," the voice said. Light, easy. "Only one fool puts up with this route at this hour by choice." My hand tightened on the mic. I stared at the dark strip of road ahead and felt my heartbeat pick up in my chest, slow and heavy. "That you?" I asked, using the name out of reflex before my brain could stop my mouth. "Where you at?" "Up ahead," they said. "Been watching your lights for a while. Thought you were going to fall asleep and park it in a ditch if I didn't say something." I swallowed. My eyes flicked to the GPS on the dash, just my icon, crawling along a lonely stretch of highway. No other trucks close enough to ping. "You running this lane tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Didn't know you were still out here." "Yeah, well," they answered, voice dropping a little softer. "Some of us never really leave, do we? The thing about grief is that it carves out a space in you. And if something presses the right way, it hits that hollow perfectly. That voice, on that frequency, speaking in exactly the same patterns I remembered from a couple of years and one funeral ago, it pressed every old bruise inside me at once. "Last I heard," I started, then cut myself off. My throat felt tight. I hadn't said their name out loud in a long time without that strange, guilty edge. "You heard right," they said. "Don't get hung up on it. Eyes on the road. You're coming up on that bad curve." I knew the one they meant. Long descending bend, rock wall on one side, drop on the other, no shoulder worth mentioning. I'd run it enough times to have its shape stamped behind my eyes. Still, my palms went slick on the wheel, and I wiped one hand on my jeans. "How far ahead are you?" I asked. "I don't see your taillights anywhere." "Not as far as you think," they said. "Just keep it steady. You're drifting a little right." I glanced at the lane lines and corrected, pulse thudding in my ears. That was the thing that messed with me. In the corner of my vision, it did look like I was hugging the white line too much. But I hadn't been staring at the shoulder. I'd been looking dead center. For them to call that out, they'd have to be able to see my truck from the right angle, from behind me. "You said you were ahead," I reminded them, trying to lace it with a laugh and failing. "Yeah," the voice said. And then, after a beat, in a quieter tone, "Yeah, for now." The radio crackled, a brief wash of static like the channel itself didn't like what had just come through it. "Come on," they added, brightening artificially. "You really gonna argue directions with me? After everything? Take the next pull-off." "There is no next pull-off," I said automatically. "Not on this stretch. Just that gravel spot we used that one time when—" I stopped, because I could see the sign now. Refuge Area 14 Mile. A big blue marker, clean and reflective, standing where I knew, with the bone-deep certainty that comes from repetition, there hadn't been one before. My heart rate spiked. The last time we'd taken a break on this road, me and the real version of that voice, we'd used a rougher spot, unmarked, half unofficial. They'd pulled ahead of me, taken the bend a little too fast, trailer fishtailing. There'd been rain, slick as oil, headlights and brake lights, and then nothing. Sirens later, paperwork, heavy hands on my shoulders telling me it wasn't my fault. "There," the voice said gently. "See? Easing off soon. You're wearing yourself down, you know that?" I didn't answer. My throat felt like it had closed. I eased my foot off the accelerator anyway, just a fraction, as the curve started to unfurl ahead. The sign passed in my mirror. The promised pull-off bloomed into view, a neat, carved-out space with a guardrail and a trash barrel and a little reflective post. Exactly the sort of safe haven that did not exist on that grade. That never had. "Take it," they said. "You're going to want to stop before you get to the bad place." A bitter laugh forced its way out of me. "What? You giving me ghost safety lectures now?" "It's not for you," they said. "Not yet. It's the next one that matters." The next one. Something cold slid down my spine, pooling at the base, heavy and electric. I kept driving. Every hair on my arm stood up. The pull-off approached and began to slip past on my right. Gravel inviting, space open, like a hand extended. The air in the cab thickened. My headlights shone on the reflective posts, then left them behind. "You're making this harder," the voice said softly. Not accusing, just sad. "Harder for who?" I asked, anger and fear twisting together in my chest. "For you? You already—" The radio squealed, a sharp feedback shriek that stabbed straight through my skull. I winced, jerked the mic away from my mouth. Static flooded the cab, a churning mess of half-voices and distant engine noise. Somewhere under it, I thought I heard my own voice from old conversations, old check-ins, old jokes, boiling up and sinking again. Then, abruptly, everything but one sound fell away. A single CB call sign, spoken in the flat, bored tone of a state patrol officer. Not mine. Not the one I'd been hearing. Someone else entirely. "Northbound rig on 62? The new voice said. "You reading me?" I thumbed the mic, grateful for the intrusion. "Yeah, go ahead." "You just passed a closed area," they said. "We got reports of a truck sitting dark on the shoulder a mile back. You see anything there?" I swallowed. My eyes flicked to the mirror, though I knew I'd see nothing but the bending darkness and the faint glow of my own taillights on the guardrail. No pull-off now, no carved-out safe space, just continuous rock and the skeletal silhouettes of trees. "Negative," I said. "Didn't see any truck." A pause, papers rustling faintly on their end. "Copy that. If you spot anything down, let us know." "Dispatch is saying we lost contact with a driver on this stretch about 10 minutes ago. Last ping just before that grade." My mouth went dry. 10 minutes ago was about when the familiar voice had cut in. I didn't answer immediately. My hand had gone numb around the mic. "I'll keep an eye out," I managed. "Appreciate it," the trooper said, and their voice clicked off, leaving me alone on the channel again. Except I wasn't alone. A moment later, my friend's voice slid back in, softer now, worn at the edges. "See?" they said. "It's always the next one. You're fine. You always were. That's not the part I can fix." My chest hurt. My palms were slick. Every part of me wanted to fling the radio out the window, to kill the power, to pretend none of this was happening. Instead, I found myself gripping the mic like it was the only tether I had to something real. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. "What do you want from me?" A long breath came through the speaker, crackly but steady. "You remember that night," they said. "You on my tail, me in too much of a hurry. Rain coming down sideways, that curve. You called in the wreck. You climbed down the embankment before anyone else got there. You held on until they pulled me out. You said you were sorry like it was your fault I went over." My vision blurred for a second. The road shimmered. I blinked hard, forcing the yellow lines to snap back into focus. "You always were dramatic," they added, something like humor ghosting through the words. "You apologized to a body, 'cause that's all that was left by then." "That's not funny," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. "You died on my radio. I heard it cut. I heard—" "I know what you heard," they interrupted gently. "Point is, you can't stop the ones who are already gone. You can only keep from joining them. That pull-off you just passed, that's where they go now. The ones who don't listen, the ones who slam the brakes when they hear something behind them and forget the curve ahead." I realized then why they'd said up ahead and behind in the same breath. I realized the only place they could be, if any of this was real, if any of it made the slightest pinky sense of twisted logic, was tethered to that one fatal stretch. Not moving forward, not moving back, just stuck. "You warning me," I said slowly, "or using me?" They laughed, and this time the sound was empty enough to make my stomach twist. "Why not both?" they said. "You keep your wheels straight. You keep your eyes on what's in front of you. Maybe you say a word when someone asks about this road at the diner. Maybe you tell them not to ride their brakes on a wet night. And me?" The radio crackled, softer now, as if they were stepping away, even though no one was physically anywhere. "I get to talk to somebody who still answers when I call. For a while." The grade leveled out. The trees thinned. A distant cluster of lights appeared ahead. A truck stop, small but bright, thrown like a lifeline into the dark. The tightness in my chest loosened a fraction. I signaled out of habit, even though there was no one to see, and felt the trailer settle as I eased off the throttle. "You going to be there?" I asked. I don't know why. The question just fell out. Up the road? At the stop? Silence stretched. For a second, I thought the connection had finally died, that maybe whatever weird allowance had been made for this conversation was over. Then, faintly, "No," they said. "That's yours. It's just you from here on out." The speaker popped. The low underlying hiss faded. Channel went dead. So clean, it felt surgical. I pulled into the truck stop and parked under the glare of sodium lights, grateful for the ugliness of it. The cracked pavement, the buzzing sign, the normality of other rigs sitting heavy and quiet in their slips. Inside, drivers talked, laughed, complained about dispatch. Radios murmured from booths. Coffee tasted like burnt reassurance. When I got back in my truck, I turned the CB on again. Nothing but the usual noise. Weather reports, bored jokes, warnings about a speed trap near mile whatever. I waited, hands hovering over the mic, listening for a voice I knew better than some of my living friends. It never came. You can chalk it up to exhaustion, if that makes you feel better. Say I nodded off and dreamed a conversation I needed to have. Say the sign was always there and I just never noticed. Say grief is a powerful ventriloquist. I won't argue. But if you ever run that stretch of road on a bad night, and your radio crackles, and someone with a voice you miss tells you to keep going, to watch your line, to skip the empty-looking pull-off that shouldn't be there, do yourself a favor. Listen. And whatever you hear breathing behind you, whatever old ghosts reach out from the speaker, don't take your eyes off the curve ahead. If you're still here after everything you've heard so far, if you've made it through all those miles and all those stories, then you're the kind of person who can sit with what I'm about to tell you. Because this isn't about something chasing my car or a voice on the radio. This one is about the moment I realized the road itself had an opinion about whether I should be on it. And the worst part is, it didn't show me by scaring me off. It did it by inviting me in. I was driving alone just before dawn on a long interstate run through the Midwest. That in-between time when the sky is a bruised, colorless gray and headlights start to look wrong. Too bright, too sharp. Like they don't quite belong to anything. I was supposed to stay on that same interstate for another 60 miles before my exit. I'd run the route before. It was simple. Straight. Nothing special. The kind of drive where you start thinking about completely unrelated things because the road stops needing your full attention. That's why the sign bothered me so much. It came up on the right out of nowhere, just after a gentle rise in the pavement. Small, green, and reflective. Exit 23. Service road. I remember the numbers clearly because there is no exit 23 on that stretch. I knew where the exits were. I knew their numbers. I'd even filled up at 21 the last time I came through. There was nothing between 21 and 24 but flat land and the monotony of the interstate. No ramps, no towns. No reason to leave the main road. And yet there it was. Clear as anything, an arrow pointing right. Service road in crisp white letters. I told myself it was probably a maintenance access. One of those half exits that only work from one direction, maybe newly built. The sky was starting to lighten a little, but everything still felt half unreal. Like the world hadn't quite committed to being daytime yet. My eyes were burning. My shoulders ached. The thought of a shortcut stabbed through my exhaustion like a promise. I didn't have to take it. I could have kept going, stayed with the familiar. Instead, I put my blinker on and drifted into the exit lane, telling myself I was just curious, that I could always loop back if it felt wrong. The ramp itself was unremarkable. A smooth arc curving downward, guardrails on both sides, patchy grass beyond. No bumps, no potholes, no signs of neglect. That's what made it worse in hindsight. It was too normal. It felt like the road had been there for years, like thousands of cars had taken it. The ramp dropped me onto a two-lane highway heading east. No sign telling me where it went. No mileage marker. Just a yellow line down the center and long, empty fields on either side, stretching into the morning haze. I drove. For the first few minutes, it almost felt like a good decision. The road was in better shape than the interstate. No construction zones, no traffic. The air through the cracked windows smelled fresher, carrying damp earth and the faint sweetness of cut crops. I watched the sky brighten in increments, the horizon blurring from purple to gray to the barest hint of blue. Then I realized my GPS had no idea where I was. The little arrow sat on a gray background, no road indicated beneath it, just an anonymous mass of nothing. The voice that usually piped up with instructions stayed silent. When I zoomed out, the map showed the interstate I'd left, my path ending cleanly at that point. Then blankness where the new road should be, as if I'd driven off the edge of what my device believed existed. I tried to shrug it off. Old software, maybe. Maybe they'd built a new connector that hadn't made it into the maps. That happens, right? But as I watched, the icon representing my car didn't move smoothly forward like it usually did. It jittered, jumped, twitched half an inch this way, half an inch that way, like it wasn't sure which direction to commit to. That tiny, meaningless display made my skin crawl more than it had any right to. I turned the GPS off. The silence that followed felt deliberate, like something in the car had been waiting for me to cut the last tether to the route I knew. The sky brightened another shade. The fields on either side of the road stayed stubbornly the same. Same short, pale grass. Same sagging fences. Same distant line of trees that never seemed to get closer. I checked my odometer. I'd been on the service road for 12 miles, which should have taken me past at least one crossroad, one driveway, one sign. There was nothing. No mailboxes, no culverts, no roadkill. Just that unbroken strip of asphalt and those perfectly spaced reflectors blinking past in steady rhythm. The first time I saw the sign, I thought it was a good thing. Interstate, 10 miles, a clean white-on-green panel up ahead, bolt straight on its post, promising a reconnection with the world I understood. I felt my shoulders relax. Of course, this was fine. It was just a back route, a shortcut. I'd be back on the main highway soon, and this would be one of those weird little anecdotes I'd tell later to make a long drive sound more interesting. 10 miles passed, then 15. The interstate never appeared, but the sign did. Again. Same spot, same distance from the slight bend in the road, same smudge of bird droppings at the top right corner of the sign face. Interstate, 10 miles. I felt my stomach lurch in a way that had nothing to do with motion. I slowed down. I watched the odometer tick another mile. Another. I counted the reflectors. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then a gap, then one set a little closer to the edge, then a post with a broken top. The pattern stuck in my mind. When the sign appeared again, my counts matched exactly. Same sequence, same imperfections. I had not moved forward. The road had somehow moved around me. The air in the car suddenly felt thin. I cracked the window more, hoping for a rush of cooler air to shock me awake, to make this feel less like sinking. It didn't help. What finally pushed me from unease into something much darker wasn't the road, though. It was the clock. I checked it out of habit. 6:14 a.m. That fit. I'd left before dawn, driven a while, taken the exit. The numbers were comforting in a small, stupid way. When you're losing your sense of place, time becomes an anchor. So I watched it. I watched as the minutes didn't change. 6:14 on the dash, 6:14 on my phone, 6:14 on the cheap watch I kept clipped near the vents. Ticking hand moving, digits refusing to follow. I don't know how long it stayed there. A few minutes. An hour. A lifetime compressed into a stretch of road where the light never shifted and the same sign kept promising the same exit 10 miles ahead, like a joke with no punchline. Panic isn't a sudden thing, not really. It's a series of small concessions. First, you tell yourself it's a glitch. Then you tell yourself you're overtired. Then you tell yourself it'll sort itself out if you just keep going. Then something in you snaps and decides, no, doing the same thing and hoping for change is insanity when the road itself is lying to you. I decided to turn around. There was no shoulder wide enough for a clean U-turn. So I waited until I reached a stretch where the grass dipped a little on either side and the fence posts were set farther back. I checked the mirror, even though I hadn't seen another vehicle since I left the interstate, and eased the wheel right, then left, slowly, carefully, until I was facing the way I'd come. Or what I assumed was the way I'd come. That was when I saw the exit sign. Not the interstate one. A different one, standing directly in front of me now, where empty horizon had been a moment before. A tall, green slab with white letters arranged in a way that made my brain stutter. Service road, next exit. There was no arrow, no number. Just that flat instruction, as if the road were telling me I hadn't taken the real turn yet. That what I'd done so far had been something like a trial run. A test. I should have floored it and aimed for the horizon. I should have treated that sign like a hallucination and refused to accept its logic. Instead, I did exactly what whoever or whatever put it there wanted. I let it shape my decisions. I drove back the way I believed I'd come. The repeating pattern followed me. Same stretch of fence, same distant tree line, same mileless emptiness. This time, when the interstate sign appeared, it didn't even bother lying. It just said, exit ahead, no distance given. I watched the odometer anyway. The numbers ticked up. They didn't matter. Up ahead, the road forked. I swear to you that fork had not been there before. Two asphalt tongues, identical in width and condition, split left and right, each curving gently out of sight. No signage, no markings, nothing to indicate which way led back to anything real. As I approached, my headlights picked up something written directly on the asphalt where the fork began. At first, in the washed-out glare, it looked like random grime. As I rolled closer, the letters resolved. Welcome back. They weren't spray-painted. They weren't chalk. They were darker than the road around them, as if the surface had been worn by repeated passage in the shape of those words, like countless tires had pressed them in over and over until the phrase became part of the material. I stopped the car. My hands were shaking. The engine idled, a too loud, too normal sound in a place that seemed to have no room left for normal. I tried to think logically. If both roads were the same, it didn't matter which I picked. If they weren't, there was no information to help me choose. Flip a coin. Close your eyes and let the wheel drift. Sit there until I went mad from inaction. None of those options appealed. In the end, what pushed me to move wasn't some sudden flash of insight. It was a noise, a low hum, almost below hearing, that started to vibrate through the frame of the car. At first, I thought it was the engine. Then I realized it was coming from the road. A faint, eager thrum, like something deep under the asphalt, had noticed me stop and was excited about the possibilities. That broke me out of my paralysis. I picked a direction, left, purely because my right hand was slightly more numb on the wheel, and turning toward the lesser discomfort felt like rebellion, even if it wasn't, and I drove. For a few seconds, nothing changed. Then everything did. The lights shifted, not gradually, like a sunrise. It was more like a scene change in a play. The sky brightened properly, the colors snapping from that endless gray into a clean, pale blue smeared with streaks of cloud. Shadows appeared where there hadn't been any. A breeze came up out of nowhere, stirring the grass along the roadside. My clock jumped from 6:14 to 7:02 in a single blink. Up ahead, I saw the interstate overpass. It was so jarringly, boringly mundane that it took my breath away. Big concrete supports, graffiti, the rumble of distant trucks overhead, a standard green sign hanging above the re-entry ramp, IXX East, IXX West, with arrows, numbers, exit symbols, all exactly where and how they should be. My GPS woke back up with a cheerful ping, the map snapping into focus, my little icon sliding seamlessly back onto known roads. I merged. I drove. Other cars passed me, horns, lights, all of it so comfortingly aggravating that I almost cried. I didn't leave the interstate again for the rest of that trip, unless there was no choice. I avoided that entire stretch for months afterward, taking longer routes, adding hours to my drives just to keep distance between myself and whatever had happened near that fake exit 23. When I finally worked up the courage to look at a physical map, the confirmation came in cold ink. No service road there. No connector. No exit 23. Just open land. You can call it a fatigue-induced episode. You can say I nodded off and dreamed it at the wheel. Maybe that's kinder than the alternative. That there are places where the infrastructure of our world doesn't quite line up. Where the lines on paper and the lines on the ground disagree. And something waits patiently for people who are tired, or curious, or arrogant enough to trust a new sign over their own memory. But I'll tell you this. Every time you see an exit you don't recognize on a road you know by heart, your brain will give you that tiny, uneasy nudge. Are you sure that was always there? And from now on, you'll hear this story in the space after that question, in the moment before your blinker goes on or stays off. If you're smart, you'll let that moment stretch long enough for the fear to do its job. Because some roads don't take you somewhere else. They take you out of everything you thought you understood. And if you're lucky, they spit you back out again before you find out what welcome back really means.